Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city or state in the comments below. And if you believe animals sometimes feel the truth before people are ready to see it, take a second to subscribe. Stories like this remind us that loyalty does not always arrive with an explanation. Sometimes it simply walks toward the person who needs it most. Nobody at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport expected that ordinary Tuesday morning to become a story officers would still be talking about years later. Nobody expected 15 highly trained police dogs to stop working at almost the exact same moment. And nobody expected every one of them to leave their assigned patrol areas and move toward the same quiet little girl sitting alone beside a wall of glass. The first sign that something was wrong was not a bark. It was silence. Terminal D had been alive only seconds earlier. Rolling suitcases rattled across the polished floor. Flight announcements echoed from the speakers above. Coffee machines hissed behind crowded counters. Parents lifted tired toddlers onto their hips. Business travelers hurried past with phones pressed to their ears, already speaking in the clipped voices of people who believed their next meeting mattered more than anything happening around them. Outside the massive windows, aircraft taxied beneath a bright Texas sky. The smell of roasted coffee drifted through the concourse, mixing with the faint metallic scent of jet fuel that always seemed to linger near airport gates. Everything felt normal, predictable, safe. Then Rex stopped. Officer Ryan Walker felt the leash tighten so suddenly that he glanced down before he even understood why. Rex, his 6-year-old German Shepherd partner, had frozen beside him near the entrance to gate D18. The dog was known throughout the airport police department for his discipline. He had worked thousands of hours in terminals, stadiums, parking garages, and public events. He had ignored screaming fans, crying babies, spilled food, running children, and the chaos of holiday travel without breaking formation. Rex did not make mistakes. He did not react for no reason. But at exactly 8:17 a.m., the German Shepherd stood rigid, ears forward, body still, amber eyes fixed on something far across the concourse. Ryan followed his gaze and saw nothing unusual at first. Travelers, families, a janitor guiding a floor machine, a woman arguing softly with an airline agent, a boy pulling a dinosaur backpack. Ordinary people moving through an ordinary morning. "What is it, buddy?" Ryan asked quietly. Rex did not look at him. He stared past the crowd toward the tall windows near gate D22. "Rex, heel." The command usually worked instantly. This time, Rex took one slow step forward. Ryan tightened his grip. "Heel." The dog did not lunge. He did not bark. He did not show teeth or raise his hackles. That was what made Ryan's stomach tighten. Rex was not responding like he had detected a threat. He was responding like he had made a decision. Before Ryan could issue another command, a voice came over his shoulder. "Walker, is Rex acting strange?" Ryan turned. Officer Kim Alvarez stood 20 yards away, both hands on the leash of a Belgian Malinois named Ranger. Ranger was also frozen, staring in the same direction. Ryan's answer died in his throat when another handler near the opposite side of the concourse called out, "Something is wrong with Duke." Then another voice. Then another. Within seconds, radio traffic crackled to life. "Unit 7, report. My dog is showing unusual behavior." "Same here." "Mine too." "Confirm location?" "Terminal D, near the 22 gate area." Ryan looked across the concourse and felt a chill move beneath his uniform. German Shepherds. Belgian Malinois. Dogs trained in different specialties, assigned to different handlers, posted in different zones of the terminal. Yet every one of them had turned toward the same destination. Travelers began noticing. Some slowed down. Others stopped completely. Several pulled out their phones. A few stepped away instinctively, assuming the dogs had found something dangerous. But the dogs were not frantic. They were calm, silent, determined. One by one, they began moving. Ryan walked with Rex, careful not to pull against him too hard. In almost 20 years of law enforcement, he had learned that a working dog's instincts deserved respect, even when they did not fit the manual. Rex was not scanning luggage. He was not sniffing bags or looking toward trash cans, bathrooms, food counters, or suspicious passengers. He moved through the crowd with his head level and his eyes locked ahead, as though following a signal no human could hear. Security officers hurried to create space. Airport employees looked at one another with confusion. A few travelers backed against the windows, letting the line of dogs pass. By the time Ryan reached gate D22, 15 canine units had converged from different directions. Then all 15 dogs stopped, directly in front of a little girl. She could not have been older than 7. She sat alone on a row of blue airport seats beside the enormous windows overlooking the runway. Her small sneakers dangled several inches above the floor. A faded purple backpack sat beside her. Sunlight touched strands of golden hair falling across her shoulders. In her hands, she held a thin silver chain, rubbing the metal between her fingers the way some people rub a worry stone. For a moment, Ryan heard nothing but the distant hum of the terminal. Then the dogs did something no one expected. They formed a circle around her. No barking, no growling, no sign of aggression. They simply arranged themselves around the child with a kind of quiet purpose that made the officers exchange unsettled looks. Rex stepped forward first. His posture softened. He lowered himself to the polished floor a few feet from the girl, facing her as though he had been assigned to guard her. One after another, the other dogs did the same. 15 police dogs sat in silence around one small child. The little girl finally looked up. Her blue eyes widened as she noticed the dogs, then the officers, then the growing crowd beyond them. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. Her voice was so soft Ryan almost missed it. He felt something tighten in his chest. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "You did not do anything wrong." She glanced around the circle. "Are they mad at me?" "No." Ryan looked down at Rex. The dog's ears were forward, but his eyes were calm. "They don't seem mad at all." The girl nodded, though uncertainty remained on her face. She tightened her fingers around the silver chain. That was when Ryan saw what hung from it. An old dog tag. Not the kind from a pet store. Not a shiny souvenir. This was worn, scratched, and dinted at one corner. The kind of tag someone had carried through real years and real work. Sunlight flashed across its surface, and Rex's eyes moved with it. Ryan crouched beside his dog. "What is it, buddy?" Rex did not look at the girl's face. He looked at the tag. A strange memory stirred at the back of Ryan's mind, too far away to name. A voice. A seminar room. A sentence about dogs and their hearts. He could not grab it yet, but it was there, waiting. "What's your name?" Ryan asked. "Emily Parker." "How old are you, Emily?" 7. "Are you traveling with someone?" She pointed toward a nearby coffee stand. "My grandma went to get hot chocolate." Ryan followed her gesture. A woman in her late 60s stood in line about 50 yards away, still unaware that her granddaughter had become the center of the most unusual scene the airport had ever witnessed. Emily looked down again and rubbed the tag with her thumb. "That necklace looks important," Ryan said carefully. For the first time, the girl smiled. It was small, but it changed her whole face. "It belonged to my dad." The words settled over the officers. Nearby, phones lowered. The crowd grew quieter. "Was your father in the military?" Ryan asked. Emily shook her head, then hesitated. "Not exactly." "What did he do?" "He worked with dogs." Ryan felt his pulse slow. Emily lifted the tag a little higher, proud and sad at the same time. "Police dogs. Grandma says he was really good with them." Rex's ears twitched. Ryan swallowed. "Do you remember him?" "A little." Emily looked down at her shoes. "Mostly pictures. And stories." "What kind of stories?" She rubbed the tag again. "He used to say dogs listen with their hearts." The sentence struck Ryan with the force of recognition, but before the memory could fully open, a voice called from behind the officers. "Emily." The older woman from the coffee stand hurried toward them, carrying 2 cups, concern already tightening her face. She stopped when she saw the ring of police dogs around her granddaughter. "Oh my goodness." Ryan stepped forward. "Ma'am, everything is all right." "Then why are there dogs around my granddaughter?" It was a fair question. No one had a fair answer. Emily brightened. "Grandma, they're nice." The woman set the hot chocolate on the seat beside the backpack and placed a protective hand on Emily's shoulder. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay." Ryan noticed the answer came too quickly. The grandmother noticed too. Rex slowly stood. Every officer tensed, but Ryan raised one hand to keep them still. The German shepherd approached Emily with extraordinary care. He lowered his head, stretched his neck, and gently touched his nose to the silver dog tag. The terminal seemed to hold its breath. Rex inhaled once, then twice. His ears lifted, his eyes widened. Then he released a sound Ryan had not heard from him in years. A soft whine. Not a warning. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. It was so quiet that only the people nearest Emily heard it, but it changed the air around them. Ryan felt the hair rise along his arms. Rex looked back at him, and in the dog's eyes was a message no training manual could explain. For several long seconds, no one moved. The grandmother looked from Rex to Ryan. "Officer, should I be worried?" Ryan answered honestly. "If these dogs thought your granddaughter was dangerous, they would be acting very differently. Whatever this is, they seem determined to stay close to her." The older woman knelt beside Emily. "Sweetheart, are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine, Grandma." Again, too fast. Ryan studied the child more carefully now. The pale skin beneath the glow of the terminal lights. The faint blue shadows under her eyes. The way she kept shifting her shoulders, as though sitting upright required more effort than it should. He had seen frightened children before. Emily did not look frightened anymore. She looked tired. Not sleepy after an early flight. Not bored in an airport. Tired in a deeper way. The grandmother brushed hair from Emily's forehead. "You were quiet all morning." "I'm just tired." "How long have you been tired?" Ryan asked before he could stop himself. Emily looked at him, then at the dogs. "A little while." "How long is a little while?" She stared at her sneakers. "A few days." Her grandmother's hand tightened on her shoulder. "Emily, why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want you to worry." The words seemed to break something in the older woman's face. Ryan looked at the dogs. 15 of them sat motionless, everyone focused on the child. Rex had worked around illness before. He had detected anxiety, fear, explosives, narcotics, gunpowder residue, and things most people never imagined a dog could separate from the thousand smells of an airport. But this was different. What if they're not reacting to the tag? Officer Alvarez whispered beside him. Ryan did not answer, because he had just had the same thought. What if the dogs had not gathered because of who Emily's father had been? What if they had gathered because of Emily herself? Ryan turned toward the airport operations supervisor standing nearby. "Call medical services." The supervisor blinked. "You think this is medical?" Ryan looked at Rex. The dog was watching Emily as if her next breath mattered to him personally. "I think we should not ignore 15 dogs telling us something is wrong." The supervisor did not argue. He lifted his radio and made the call. A murmur moved through the nearby crowd. Some travelers looked worried now. Others stepped back, suddenly ashamed of recording what at first seemed like a curiosity. Airport staff widened the perimeter, keeping people at a respectful distance. Emily looked from Ryan to her grandmother. "Am I in trouble?" Her grandmother pulled her close. "No, baby. Nobody is in trouble. But I don't want to miss our flight." Ryan's throat tightened. That was how children measured danger sometimes. Not in medical terms. Not in risk. In trips ruined, adults worried, plans changed. "What flight are you taking?" he asked. "To Denver," Emily said. "Grandma said there are mountains bigger than buildings." Her grandmother tried to smile. "We can see mountains another day if we need to." Emily looked down, guilt crossing her face. "I wanted you to have fun." The older woman knelt fully now, both hands on Emily's arms. "Emily Parker, being with you is the fun. Everything else can wait." Rex shifted closer and laid his head beside Emily's shoe. A few minutes later, the airport medical response team arrived. Leading them was Dr. Melissa Carter, an emergency physician who oversaw the airport medical station. She was calm, observant, and quick to understand that this was not an ordinary passenger complaint. She slowed as she approached the circle of dogs. "No one moved them?" she asked. "No one could," Ryan said. "Not without forcing them." Dr. Carter's eyes moved from dog to dog, then to Emily. "Interesting. Emily reports several days of fatigue," Ryan said. "Some dizziness, maybe headaches." The dogs reacted before anyone noticed anything. The doctor nodded. Dogs can detect changes in human scent and body chemistry. Blood sugar, hormonal shifts, seizures before they happen. Some have even been trained to alert to cardiac events. The grandmother looked sharply at her. "Cardiac. I am not saying that is what this is," Dr. Carter said gently. "I'm only saying dogs sometimes notice things before we do." She crouched in front of Emily and smiled. "Hi, Emily. I'm Dr. Carter. Would it be okay if I checked you over?" Emily glanced at her grandmother, then nodded. The examination began gently. Pulse, breathing, skin color, temperature, questions about sleep, food, headaches, dizziness, chest discomfort, whether she had felt faint while running or climbing stairs. Emily answered with the caution of a child who had learned to protect adults from worry. Sometimes my heart feels fluttery, she admitted. Her grandmother closed her eyes. How often? Dr. Carter asked. Not all the time. When was the last time? Emily hesitated. This morning, when we were walking from the parking garage. Did you tell your grandmother? No, why not? Emily looked ashamed. Because she already bought the tickets. The grandmother pulled her close, tears bright in her eyes. Oh, honey, tickets don't matter. The dogs did not move. They watched with a focus that made even seasoned officers uncomfortable. Dr. Carter connected a small portable monitor. Emily seemed more curious then. Afraid, asking whether the sticky pads would hurt. The doctor reassured her they would not. Ryan stood behind Rex, one hand resting lightly near the leash, though he knew the dog was not going anywhere. The monitor beeped softly. Dr. Carter studied the screen. Her face changed. Not dramatically, not in a way a child would notice. But Ryan saw it. The professional calm remained, yet something behind her eyes sharpened. Doctor, he asked. She did not answer right away. She watched the rhythm, adjusted a lead, waited, then looked at Emily with a warm smile that did not quite hide her concern. Emily, I'd like to get a few more readings. The grandmother's voice trembled. What is it? Dr. Carter lowered her voice. There are some irregularities I do not want to ignore. Around them, the dogs seemed to become even stiller. Ryan looked down at Rex. The German shepherd's gaze had not left Emily's chest. Dr. Carter ran the reading again. A second medical technician handed her a tablet. She reviewed the numbers, then looked toward the dogs. For a moment, she seemed almost shaken by the timing of it all. The dogs knew first, she said quietly. The sentence spread through the circle like cold wind. Emily looked confused. Knew what? Dr. Carter immediately softened her voice. They knew we needed to pay attention to you, sweetheart. The little girl turned toward Rex. You knew? Rex moved his head just enough to touch her knee. Emily smiled weakly and placed her hand on his fur. Ryan's memory returned then with surprising clarity. A training seminar in Houston, 8 years earlier. A room full of canine officers. A man at the front with kind eyes, a steady voice, and a silver tag hanging from a chain around his neck. Daniel Parker. Ryan had met him only twice, but some people stayed in your mind. Daniel had been one of them. He was the kind of officer who treated working dogs not as equipment, not as trophies, but as partners with souls. He talked about trust more than dominance, patience more than control. He believed a dog's loyalty was not something you commanded. It was something you earned. And he had said it exactly. Dogs listen with their hearts. Ryan turned to Emily. Your last name is Parker. She nodded. Was your dad's name Daniel? Emily's eyes widened. Her grandmother looked up quickly. You knew Daniel? The older woman asked. Ryan nodded slowly. Not well, but yes. I met him at canine training events. He was respected by a lot of people. Emily leaned forward, suddenly more awake. You knew my dad? I did. Ryan crouched beside her again. He talked about dogs like they were family. Emily smiled, and for the first time that morning the sadness in her face was mixed with pride. Grandma says he loved them more than anything. Her grandmother touched her hair. He loved you more. The words made Emily look down. Ryan studied the dog tag again. He wore that. Emily nodded. Grandma gave it to me after he died. The concourse noise seemed to fade. Ryan did not ask how Daniel had died. The answer was written in the grandmother's face, in the way she held Emily, in the silence that followed the word. He used to carry it everywhere, the grandmother said. Said it reminded him to come home to what mattered. Ryan remembered another thing Daniel had said in that seminar. Every dog deserves to know someone will come back for them. People had smiled when he said it, thinking it was sentimental. But Daniel had meant it. He believed loyalty was built from promises kept. Dr. Carter stepped away to send the readings to a pediatric cardiac specialist at a hospital in Dallas. While she spoke quietly on the phone, the airport seemed suspended between two realities. Flights continued boarding. Announcements continued rolling through the speakers. People still bought coffee and checked departure screens. But around Emily, time had slowed. Rex remained beside her. Ranger lay near the grandmother's feet. Duke, a large sable shepherd from another unit, rested with his head between his paws, eyes open and alert. The other dogs held the circle with a patience that felt almost sacred. Emily rubbed the tag. Did my dad ever meet Rex? Ryan looked at his partner. I don't think so. Rex was young when your dad was still working. But your dad trained with dogs like Rex. What did they think of him? The question caught Ryan off guard. He looked around the circle of animals who had somehow chosen her, then back at Emily. I think they trusted him completely. Emily absorbed that answer as if it were a gift. Her grandmother whispered, Daniel used to say dogs could tell when someone needed help. I thought he meant emotionally. Maybe he did, Ryan said. Maybe he meant more than that. The grandmother looked at Emily with a pain Ryan recognized. It was the pain of a caregiver realizing a child had been protecting her from the truth. She's been through so much, the woman said quietly. After Daniel passed, she carried that tag everywhere. Slept with it under her pillow. Wore it to school until her teacher called me because the chain kept catching on her backpack. I kept telling her she didn't need to wear grief around her neck. Emily looked up. It's not grief. Her grandmother's expression softened. It's Dad, Emily said. No one spoke for a moment. Ryan looked away toward the runway, giving the family the dignity of privacy even in a public place. Dr. Carter returned then, and one look at her face changed everything. She knelt in front of the grandmother. The pediatric specialist reviewed what we sent. Emily may have an underlying heart condition that needs immediate evaluation. The grandmother's mouth trembled. Heart condition? It is not a final diagnosis, the doctor said. But it is serious enough that I want her transported to a pediatric cardiac center now. The good news is that we found it before she collapsed, before she was on a plane, before she was far from help. Timing matters, and today timing may have given us a chance. Emily looked from one adult to another. Am I sick? Dr. Carter took her hand. You are going to see doctors who know exactly how to help your heart work the way it should. Emily considered this. Can Grandma come? Absolutely. Can Rex come? A few people smiled through tears. Ryan crouched beside her. Rex has a job here, sweetheart. Emily nodded slowly, trying to be brave. My dad had a job too. Yes, he did. Did he leave because of his job? The question struck the grandmother hard. Ryan saw her swallow, saw her try to answer and fail. Emily seemed to understand more than anyone wanted her to. Grandma says he got hurt helping people. Ryan kept his voice steady. Then he was very brave. Emily touched the dog tag. I don't remember his voice very much anymore. Her grandmother closed her eyes. I remember his hands, Emily continued softly, and the way he smelled like soap and dogs. And I remember when I was little, he would put his ear on my chest and tell me my heart sounded like a tiny drum. Dr. Carter glanced at the grandmother. The older woman whispered, Daniel worried about her heart. Ryan turned sharply. What do you mean? Dr. Carter asked. The grandmother's eyes filled. When Emily was younger, a doctor heard something. They said it was probably nothing, but they wanted more tests. Daniel kept saying we should follow up. Then he died before the appointment. After the funeral, everything fell apart. I was trying to handle paperwork, insurance, school, grief. Emily seemed fine. The pediatrician later said the murmur wasn't obvious anymore. She covered her mouth. I thought we were safe. Dr. Carter squeezed her shoulder. You did what you could with what you knew. But Daniel knew. Maybe he noticed signs others missed. The grandmother looked at the dogs. And they noticed too. At that moment, Rex lifted his head and pressed his muzzle gently against Emily's arm. One by one, the other dogs began to relax. Not fully, but enough that their handlers noticed. The tension that had held the circle firm for nearly an hour started to ease. Officer Alvarez whispered. They heard her. Ryan nodded. It was the only explanation that felt true. The dogs had delivered their warning. The danger was no longer hidden. Medical transport arrived a few minutes later. Airport staff cleared a path through the concourse. Travelers stood aside, many wiping their eyes. Some had missed flights. Some had delayed breakfast. Some would later tell the story as coincidence, others as instinct, others as something closer to grace. But in that moment, no one seemed annoyed. People simply watched a little girl stand from her seat, her grandmother steadying her, while 15 police dogs rose with her almost as one. The movement sent a quiet gasp through the terminal. Emily noticed and smiled for the first time in several minutes. They keep copying me. Ryan laughed softly. Maybe they like being around you. Or maybe they liked my dad. No one corrected her. As Emily prepared to leave, Rex stepped forward. He touched his nose to the silver tag one final time, then looked into Emily's eyes. The girl leaned down and whispered something into his ear. Ryan could not hear the words. Neither could her grandmother. Whatever Emily said belonged to the child and the dog alone. Rex pressed his head against her shoulder. Emily wrapped her thin arms around his neck. For all his years in uniform, for every emergency Ryan had seen, every rescue, every loss, every hard conversation delivered under fluorescent lights, nothing had prepared him for the sight of that old German shepherd standing completely still while a little girl held him like he was the last bridge between her father and the world. "Thank you," she whispered. Rex closed his eyes. The medical team did not rush Emily away the way people in movies rush patients through sliding doors. Real life moved differently. It moved through signatures, gentle explanations, equipment checks, and adults doing their best not to frighten a child while understanding that minutes mattered. Dr. Carter asked the grandmother for Emily's full name, date of birth, allergies, medications, insurance information, the name of her pediatrician, and whether there was any family history of heart disease. Each question seemed simple on the surface, but together they made the grandmother look smaller. "I should have brought her records," she whispered. "You brought her," Dr. Carter said. "That is what matters right now." Emily watched them, trying to read every adult face. Children are experts at that. They may not understand medical words, but they understand silence. They understand the way grown-ups lower their voices. They understand the way a hand lingers too long on their shoulder. Ryan saw Emily's chin tremble once before she pressed her lips together and looked down at Rex. "I am not scared," she said. No one believed her, and because no one believed her, no one embarrassed her by saying so. Rex shifted closer until his side touched her leg. Emily slid her fingers into the thick fur at his neck. The contact steadied her in a way no adult reassurance could. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders dropped. Ryan watched it happen and felt a familiar ache in his chest. Working dogs were trained for obedience, detection, tracking, and control, but there were gifts no academy could install in them. Some dogs simply knew how to become an anchor. One traveler, an older man in a navy blazer, stepped toward the perimeter and removed his hat. He had been standing there for nearly half an hour. His own boarding group had been called twice, and still he had not moved. When an airport employee told him he might miss his flight, he shook his head and said, "Some things are more important than being on time." A young mother nearby held her sleeping baby tighter. A teenage boy who had been recording earlier lowered his phone and deleted the video without being asked. An airline gate agent quietly brought bottles of water for the grandmother and the officers. Nobody made a speech. Nobody needed one. A public place that usually belonged to hurry had, for once, learned to wait. Ryan looked around and thought of Daniel Parker again. Daniel would have understood that part. He had once told a room full of officers that dogs were good for people because they forced human beings to return to the present moment. A dog did not care about yesterday's mistake or tomorrow's fear. A dog cared about the person standing right there, breathing right now. And right now, every dog in that terminal cared about Emily. Dr. Carter crouched again. "Emily, the transport team is going to take you to a hospital where children's heart doctors can look at you. Your grandmother will be with you the whole time. I will send them everything we found so they are ready when you arrive." Emily nodded, but her eyes moved toward the windows. "What about Denver?" Her grandmother wiped at her cheek and tried to smile. "Denver has waited a long time for us. It can wait a little longer. But you wanted to see the mountains. I want to see you grow up. Mountains are second." The simplicity of it seemed to reach Emily. She leaned into her grandmother, and the older woman wrapped both arms around her. For a moment, the airport disappeared around them. There were no flight numbers, no public announcements, no strangers. There was only a grandmother holding the child her son had left behind, realizing that love had just been given a second chance to pay attention. The medical team guided Emily and her grandmother toward the waiting transport. The dogs remained in place, watching. When Emily reached the edge of the cleared path, she turned back. 15K9S stood facing her. Sunlight stretched across the floor between them. For a moment, no one moved. Then Emily lifted her hand and waved. One by one, tails began to wag. Later, when Ryan thought back on the morning, he remembered one detail more clearly than all the rest. It was not the crowd or the radios or even the impossible circle of dogs. It was the look on Emily's face when she realized nobody was angry with her for needing help. That look stayed with him because it was both relief and surprise. A child should never be surprised by tenderness, he thought. But too many were. Too many learned early that pain was inconvenient, that fear should be hidden, that adults had enough problems already. Rex had not understood insurance forms or cardiology reports. He had not known the history of a missed appointment or the grief inside a grandmother's apology. But he had understood the simplest truth in the terminal. A child was in trouble. A child needed someone to stop walking past. So he stopped. And because he stopped, others stopped too. The airport slowly returned to motion after she left. Flights boarded. Coffee lines reformed. Travelers hurried toward gates with their rolling bags and delayed schedules. But something in Terminal D had changed. People spoke more softly for the rest of that morning. Officers who had worked enough years to grow cynical found themselves standing quietly at posts, thinking about the child, the tag, and the dogs who had refused to be ignored. Ryan returned to patrol with Rex, but the dog remained subdued. Not distracted. Not disobedient. Just thoughtful, if such a word could be used for a German shepherd. He walked close to Ryan's leg, occasionally looking toward the doors where Emily had disappeared. "You did good," Ryan told him. Rex glanced up, then forward again. By late afternoon, the first rumors had spread across airport staff channels. A little girl, 15K9S. A possible heart condition. A father who had once trained police dogs. Ryan avoided speculation. He had seen too many stories twisted by people who needed miracles to be prettier than real life. The truth was powerful enough without exaggeration. That evening, Dr. Carter called him. "They admitted Emily," she said. "The specialists found an arrhythmia and structural concerns they want to monitor closely. They believe she may need a procedure, but they are optimistic." Ryan sat alone in the K9 office, Rex asleep beneath his desk. Would she have been in danger on the flight? There was a pause. "Possibly," Dr. Carter said. Cabin pressure, stress, dehydration, walking through the airport, all of it could have pushed her body harder. "We cannot say what would have happened. But we can say it was better that she was found when she was." Ryan looked down at Rex. The dog opened one eye, as if he knew they were talking about him. For the first few nights after the airport incident, Ryan slept badly. He kept waking before dawn with the same image in his mind. Emily's small hand rubbing the silver tag, Rex staring at her chest, Dr. Carter's quiet words floating in the terminal air. The dogs knew first. Ryan had heard incredible claims about animals over the years. Some were exaggerated. Some were wishful thinking. Some were built from grief, because grieving people often searched for signs that love had not truly left. But Ryan had been there. He had felt the leash tighten. He had watched Rex ignore a command for the first time not out of defiance, but out of purpose. He had seen dogs from different teams make the same choice without instruction. That was not a story polished by memory. That was a fact. He requested copies of the incident reports, not because he wanted attention, but because he wanted the department to study what had happened. The reports were careful and professional. They described simultaneous behavioral changes in multiple K9 units, convergence near gate D22, non-aggressive protective posture, medical evaluation, and transport of a minor passenger for urgent assessment. The language was dry, as official language tends to be. It did not mention the way the air felt. It did not mention the old man missing his flight, or Emily asking if Rex could come, or the exact moment the dogs relaxed when the adults finally understood. Paper could record what happened. It could not record what it meant. Dr. Carter later told Ryan the hospital team had asked detailed questions about the dogs. They were interested but cautious, as doctors had to be. Medicine required evidence. It did not run on wonder. Still, one pediatric cardiologist admitted that trained animals sometimes detected physiological changes long before clinical symptoms became obvious. A child's body under strain could produce subtle scent changes. Stress hormones, oxygen shifts, metabolic differences, even changes in sweat chemistry could all create a signal strong enough for a dog to notice. "That explains one dog," Ryan had said. Dr. Carter paused before answering. "It does not neatly explain 15. That was the part everyone came back to. 15. Not one remarkable dog. Not one lucky coincidence. 15 separate animals, each trained to respond to scent, behavior, and instinct, had gathered around the same child at the same time. The number made people uncomfortable because it left room for mystery. And human beings, Ryan knew, liked mysteries best when they could solve them quickly. Rex offered no explanation. He went back to work the next morning as if nothing unusual had happened. He searched bags, walked patrols, ignored food wrappers, accepted praise from children only when Ryan allowed it, and slept under the office desk with the same heavy sigh he always gave after lunch. But once, near gate D22, he paused and looked toward the row of blue seats. Just for a second. Then he moved on. Ryan did not correct him. 3 weeks later, autumn settled over North Texas with a rare coolness that made the air smell like dry leaves and distant rain. Behind the Airport Police K-9 Operations Center, Ryan worked Rex through a training course beneath a low afternoon sun. The old German shepherd moved with confidence, though silver had begun to show around his muzzle. He cleared obstacles, located a hidden training scent, and returned to Ryan with the proud expression of a dog who still believed retirement was a rumor invented by weaker animals. Ryan was reviewing paperwork later that day when the front desk officer called back. "Walker, you have visitors." "Who?" "And Emily Parker and her grandmother." Ryan stood so quickly his chair rolled backward. Through the office window, he saw them in the lobby. Emily looked smaller without the vast airport around her, but healthier. Color had returned to her cheeks. Her hair was pulled back with a blue ribbon. Around her neck hung the silver dog tag. Rex heard her before Ryan opened the door. The German shepherd lifted his head. His ears went straight up. Then, for only the second time Ryan could remember, Rex broke position without a command. He trotted into the lobby. Emily's face lit up. "Rex!" The dog reached her and gently pressed his head against her shoulder, exactly as he had done in Terminal D. Emily wrapped her arms around his neck and laughed, a clear, bright sound that made the room feel warmer. Her grandmother wiped tears before they could fall. "We wanted to thank everyone." Ryan shook his head. "You don't owe us anything." "Maybe not," she said. "But gratitude feels better when it is shared." Emily looked up. "The doctor said I'm not allowed to run fast yet." "That sounds like a hard rule," Ryan said. "It is. But Grandma says walking is good. And I can still draw. Drawing is important work." Emily nodded seriously. "I brought you something." Before she handed it over, Ryan gave her a tour. She met the handlers. She saw the training field, the kennels, the equipment room, and the photographs of K-9 partners past and present. Officers who had been there that morning stopped by to say hello. Some crouched to Emily's level and told her how brave she had been. She accepted the compliments with shyness, usually looking at Rex instead of the person speaking. During the tour, Emily asked to see where the dogs slept. Ryan explained that most K-9 partners went home with their handlers at the end of shift because the bond did not stop when the uniform came off. Emily seemed to like that answer. She asked whether Rex had a favorite toy, whether he got scared during thunderstorms, whether he understood birthdays, and whether dogs missed people after they were gone. That last question made Ryan slow his steps. "Yes," he said. "I believe they do." Emily touched the dog tag. "For how long?" Ryan looked toward the memorial wall at the end of the hall. "Longer than we think." She accepted that with a seriousness beyond her years. Grief had made her older in some ways, but not hard. That was what struck Ryan most. Emily had lost her father, carried a frightening condition she barely understood, and still worried more about ruining her grandmother's trip than about herself. There was a quiet courage in that, but also a child's misunderstanding of love. Children sometimes believe they had to be easy to be loved well. They learned to hide pain because adults looked tired. They learned to say they were fine because fine made people smile. Ryan hoped the adults around Emily would teach her a different lesson now. That being loved meant being allowed to need help. That honesty was not a burden. That a tired heart deserved attention, whether it belonged to a child, a grandmother, or an officer who had seen too much and spoken too little. In the training yard, one of the younger dogs, a restless Malinois named Ace, bounded toward Emily with too much enthusiasm and was immediately called back by his handler. Emily laughed and stepped behind Rex. Rex did not growl or correct the younger dog. He simply positioned himself between Emily and the excitement, calm as a fence post. "He is still guarding me," Emily said. "Looks that way," Ryan answered. "Does he think I am still sick?" Ryan chose his words carefully. "I think he remembers that you are important." Emily smiled at that. "Everybody is important." "You are right. But sometimes people forget." Ryan looked at her, surprised by the quiet truth of it. "Yes," he said. "Sometimes they do." Emily looked down at Rex and scratched behind his ear. "Dogs don't." No one had an answer better than that. At one point, she asked if all police dogs were heroes. Ryan thought about it. They are partners. Sometimes partners become heroes because they do the right thing when it matters. Emily looked at Rex. He did the right thing. He did. So did the others. Yes, Ryan said. All of them. Her grandmother walked slowly beside them, watching Emily with the careful attention of someone who had nearly lost something priceless and could not stop checking that it was still there. How is she really? Ryan asked quietly when Emily stepped ahead to look at a training vest. The grandmother folded her hands. Better. The doctors found the problem early enough to treat it. There will be follow-ups, maybe a procedure later, maybe medicine for a long time. But they said she can have a full life if we stay on top of it. Ryan nodded. That's good. It is more than good. Her voice broke slightly. That morning, I kept thinking about the flight. About how annoyed I was that the coffee line was slow. About how I almost told Emily to hurry. If those dogs had not stopped. Ryan gave her a moment. She looked toward Rex. Daniel always said dogs could hear what people hide. I used to smile when he said things like that. I thought he was just being Daniel. Maybe Daniel understood them better than most of us. He did. She looked at Emily. And maybe he left her with the one thing that would help them find her. Ryan did not know whether that was scientifically true. He knew dogs could detect scent and chemical changes. He knew they associated smells with memory. He knew working dogs were far more observant than people wanted to admit. But he also knew there were moments in life when an explanation did not lessen the wonder. Maybe the dogs smelled Emily's changing body chemistry. Maybe Rex recognized something on Daniel's old tag. Maybe both truths had met in the middle. And maybe love, once given deeply enough, left traces even time could not erase. Inside the operations building, Emily wandered toward a memorial wall. Framed. Photographs lined the hallway. Retired K9s, fallen officers. Partners who had served faithfully and were remembered with the quiet respect law enforcement gives its own. Then Emily stopped. Her smile faded, but not into sadness exactly. Into awe. Ryan followed her gaze. Near the center of the wall hung a photograph of Daniel Parker. Younger than Ryan remembered him, smiling beside a German shepherd partner named Scout. Daniel's hand rested on the dog's shoulder. Around his neck was the same silver tag Emily now wore. Emily stepped closer. No one interrupted her. She touched the frame with 2 fingers. Hi, Dad. The hallway became very still. Rex sat beside her without being told. His ears softened. His breathing slowed. Sunlight streamed through a nearby window, touching the glass over Daniel's photograph and the dog tag at Emily's chest at the same time. For one brief second, the past and present seemed joined by the same beam of light. Her grandmother stood behind her, one hand over her heart. He would be proud of you, she whispered. Emily smiled without looking away from the photograph. Ryan said that too. Then it must be true. Emily stayed there for a long moment. When she finally turned around, her eyes were wet but peaceful. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small envelope. I made this for you, she told Ryan. Inside was a drawing done in colored pencil. 15 dogs sat in a circle around a little girl with yellow hair. The dogs were not perfect. Some had ears too large. One had paws like mittens. Rex was clearly the biggest, sitting closest to the girl. Above the picture, in careful, uneven handwriting, Emily had written one sentence. Dogs listen with their hearts. Ryan stared at the drawing, unable to speak for a moment. Emily grew nervous. Do you like it? He cleared his throat. I love it. Grandma helped me spell listen. She did a good job. I wanted to draw all 15, but I got tired after 11, so Grandma said I could take a break. That was smart. Emily looked at Rex. I'm learning to take breaks. Rex wagged his tail once, as though approving. Ryan folded the drawing carefully and placed it inside the top drawer of his desk, not because he wanted to hide it, but because he knew exactly where it belonged. Some things were not decorations. They were reminders. The visit ended near sunset. The sky over the training field had turned gold and amber, and a distant plane climbed slowly into the clouds. Rex walked Emily and her grandmother all the way to the parking lot. He stayed close to Emily's side, matching her slower pace as though he understood the doctor's orders. Before getting into the car, Emily knelt in front of him. You found me, she whispered. Rex touched his nose to the dog tag. The same gesture, the same quiet promise. Emily hugged him one last time. Tell the other dogs thank you. Ryan smiled. I will. And tell them I'm okay. I'll tell them that too. The car pulled away slowly. Emily waved through the window until the vehicle disappeared beyond the gate. Ryan and Rex stood together in the evening light. Neither moved for a while. Finally, Ryan rested his hand on Rex's shoulder. The old dog leaned gently against his leg. No words were necessary. Some stories do not end when the ambulance leaves. Some stories do not end when doctors find the answer or when a child comes home smiling. Some stories continue quietly inside everyone who witnessed them. They become the reason an officer trusts a dog's hesitation. The reason a grandmother listens more closely when a child says she is only tired. The reason strangers in an airport lower their phones and remember that behind every unusual moment, there may be a human life asking to be seen. That morning at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, 15 dogs did more than surround a little girl. They interrupted the rush of the world. They stood between a child and a danger no one else could see. They carried forward the legacy of a father who believed loyalty was sacred, and they reminded everyone watching that love does not always speak in words. Sometimes it arrives in silence. Sometimes it sits patiently at your feet. Sometimes it presses a cold nose against an old silver tag and refuses to move until help finally comes. Because sometimes the first souls to recognize our pain are the ones who cannot explain how. They know. And sometimes love finds its way back to us on 4 faithful paws.